Even in some of the world's most beautiful forests, people vanish without a trace. No signs, no clues, just gone. Hoia Baciu Forest is often called the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania. You can pretty much imagine what that means, a forest where weird stuff happens. And of course there's all the oddly shaped trees too. Locals aren't shy about warning anyone who even thinks about going here, because as eerie as it looks, there's said to be something far darker lurking there, something that may be responsible for all the unexplained, unsolved disappearances. One of the most famous stories is the tale of a shepherd who, along with his entire flock of 200 sheep, just vanished one night. People searched the forest for any trace of them, but they found nothing. The most chilling story, though, all comes from a young girl who disappeared in this forest. For 5 years, nobody knew what happened to her until one day she reappeared like nothing had ever happened. It's said that she was wearing the same clothes she wore the day she disappeared, looking completely unchanged. No signs of hunger, distress, or even aging. It was like she had just stepped out of another dimension and walked right back into the same spot. Now, that's more of an urban legend, but aside from the creepy missing persons cases, one of the most infamous spots in the forest is the clearing, which is this strange circular patch of land inside the forest where no trees seem to grow. It's barren, and people say that when you step inside it, you feel off, almost like you're being watched, or like the air is just a little too thick to breathe. Some people have even claimed to feel sudden nausea or anxiety when they step in, like their body knows that something just isn't right. Next up, we got the Great Smoky Mountains, a beautiful national park on the border between North Carolina and Tennessee. The place is gorgeous, I mean, just look at it. Beautiful trees, misty peaks, and tons of wildlife. But there's a darker side to this beauty. Take the case of Thelma Pauline Melton, who went missing in 1981 while hiking with 2 friends. They were on a trail that she knew well. She'd hiked it countless times before, but one moment she was walking ahead of her friends and then she was gone. Her friends called out for her, searched the area, brought in search teams, but there was never any sign of Thelma. She hadn't been far ahead when she went missing either, and she knew the trail, so where did she go? The trail wasn't even rugged, and she was an experienced hiker anyway. Thelma isn't the only one though. Over the years there have been dozens of people who've gone missing in the Smokies under similarly eerie circumstances. Some people have even been spotted moments before vanishing. One minute they were there and then they're just not. These disappearances don't make any sense. People hike there every day, yet there are still mysteries that haven't been solved, and no real explanation for why people vanish. Some people are found again, but there are others who are just never found. And it's not like they're in the middle of nowhere necessarily. I mean, the Smokies are a well-traveled area, so it's not like these hikers just get swallowed up by the wild. They disappeared and no one could figure out where they went or what happened. Whether it's strange natural causes or something else, the Great Smoky Mountains definitely hold on to some of the best kept secrets in the world. New River Gorge National Park, spread out over 70,000 acres, is full of these towering cliffs, waterfalls, rugged forests, but it's also a place where the land can quickly turn against you. The park sits along the New River, one of the oldest rivers in North America, and while visitors come here all the time to hike, rock climb, and kayak, there have also been a lot of strange disappearances over the years. Since 1977, there have been at least 8 bizarre missing persons cases in the park, and not all of them are easily explained. Like the case of Georgia Melinda Stone, for example. In 2016, Georgia vanished while out in the park, and her remains were eventually found, but not in the park. They were discovered outside. Had the search and rescue team been covering the right areas? How did she end up so far from where she was last seen? Then there's the disappearance of Jasmine Michelle Cruz in 2016. Jasmine was last seen near the park's borders, and the case has never been solved. The park's vast terrain can make it incredibly difficult for search teams to cover every possible area. And with the cliffs, the dense forests, the unpredictable weather, it's easy to see how someone could go missing and remain unseen for weeks or even longer, as in never seen again. Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado is one of those places that looks like a postcard. It's got these towering peaks, beautiful lakes, but like with a lot of wild places, it can also be dangerous. The park spans over 415,000 acres, so there's a lot of rough terrain to get lost in, and that's exactly what's happened to a lot of people over the years. One of the biggest issues here is altitude sickness. People who aren't used to the thin air can get dizzy, nauseous, disoriented, and that can be, of course, the difference between making it back to the trailhead and becoming another missing person. A man named Rudy Motor disappeared in 1983 while hiking in the park. He wasn't a rookie hiker either. He knew what he was doing, but for some reason, he just vanished. The search teams combed the area, but no trace of him was found until 2020. It's believed he died in a sudden avalanche. Another man named James Pruitt disappeared in 2019. He's still yet to be found. With dangerous storms and hail that can pop up out of nowhere, it's really not hard to see how someone could get lost or caught off guard. Between 2018 and 2020 alone, the park reported 341 search and rescue incidents, and that doesn't even count all the cases that might not have made the headlines. Yosemite National Park in California's Sierra Nevada mountains has a seriously creepy side to it. Over the years, it's gained a reputation for all the weird stuff said to go on there, including people seeming to vanish without a trace. And what's even weirder, there are all these stories of these people being found again, but miles away from where they disappeared, sometimes after being gone for days or even weeks. So how did they get so far without being seen, and how did they survive in the wild, especially if they were underage folks with no survival skills? A lot of these disappearances are totally baffling. In some cases, people have been found with no memory of what happened to them. It's like their minds just erased a huge chunk of time. One minute they were walking along the trail, and the next, nothing. It's as if they were just plucked out of the forest and dropped back down in some random spot. This has led to all sorts of creepy theories, of course. Some people believe the park is haunted by spirits that somehow transport people away, and there are urban legends about wendigos and other creatures stalking the park's dense woods, especially at night. Yellowstone National Park is one of those places that's as beautiful as it is unpredictable. You got steaming hot springs, geysers, and wildlife everywhere. It's one of the most unique looking parks on this list, but this also is what makes it so dangerous. Dense forests, all the rocky cliffs, the unpredictable weather, everything from grizzly bears to bison. It can make a trip here a lot more dangerous than you'd like, especially if you happen to veer off the beaten path. There have been at least 12 documented cases of people disappearing in Yellowstone, though some say the number is probably higher, considering how vast and remote parts of the park are. Stuart Isaac, for example, disappeared in 2010 while hiking. No trace of him has ever been found. Then there's Dennis Johnson, who went missing in 1966. His sister had gone missing, and he and his father went looking for her. Dennis, unfortunately, ended up getting lost in the process. The sister was later found, thankfully, but Dennis was never seen again. Despite a massive search, no sign of him has ever been uncovered. Yellowstone's vast terrain offers so many places to hide or get lost, even if you're in a well-traveled area. But it's not just the wilderness that's a problem. The weather here can change on a dime, and that kind of sudden shift in conditions can make even experienced hikers lose their way or get disoriented. Shenandoah National Park in Virginia might seem like a quiet, peaceful escape at first glance, and it probably is most of the time. Stretching across 200,000 acres of the Blue Ridge Mountains, the park is full of beautiful views, waterfalls, plenty of wildlife, but while it's a beautiful place to visit, it's also a place with a dark reputation when it comes to people going missing. Over the years, more than 1,000 people apparently have gone missing in the park, and some of the cases remain unsolved. The park has its share of steep mountains, deep gorges, dense forests, which can make it easy to get lost if you're not careful. But what's strange about Shenandoah is how often people vanish without a trace. There are no signs of struggle, no clues about what happened to them, they just disappear. Some of the most mysterious disappearances have taken place on the park's many hiking trails, which attract thousands of people every year. Stories about strange happenings in the Appalachian Mountains are pretty common, and some locals even talk about cryptids, mysterious creatures said to roam the woods. Paul Braxton Fugate was a park ranger at Chiricahua National Monument in Arizona. In January of 1980, Fugate disappeared and was never seen again. It all started when he finished his shift at the visitor center around 2 p.m. He told a coworker that if he wasn't back by 4:30, they could start wrapping up for the day. So he set off alone on a hike to check out a trail, dressed in his ranger uniform. and no one ever saw him again. The disappearance was noticed pretty quickly when he didn't return to close the park. Fugate was the only permanent staff member at Shirakawa, and he wouldn't have left the other seasonal employee to finish the job completely alone. So search teams were sent out immediately, but the 17 square miles of wild rocky terrain made it pretty difficult to even begin a thorough search. There was no sign of him, no tracks, no gear, no clues. And to make matters even stranger, the National Park Service seemed to dismiss the possibility that something serious had even happened. They told his wife Dodie that they believed he'd just walked off the job. This meant Fugate's wife couldn't collect any benefits or his pension, and they even demanded she pay back over $6,000 in salary that they had given her during his disappearance. Years later, in 1986, the case was reviewed and Dottie was finally granted his benefits, but Fugate's disappearance has never been solved.
Hoia Baciu Forest in Romania is known to be one of the most cursed and haunted forests in the world, which really comes as no surprise when you look at it. The forest is full of twisted and mangled trees that appear to rotate clockwise and provide an eerie setting for some pretty creepy happenings. Many people who have entered the forest claim to have lost track of time, unknowingly spending hours walking through the winding trees before eventually making their way out of the forest. However, some people aren't so lucky. There have been many cases of people entering Hoia Baciu and never being seen again, despite numerous search efforts. No one knows the reason, but there are theories. Paranormal activity and extraterrestrial involvement. Many locals from the area claim that the tormented souls of 200 Romanian peasants who were gruesomely killed in the forest remain there to that day. You will know you have come face to face with one when you see the piercing green eyes of a hooded figure staring at you from behind a tree branch. And to make matters worse, these deceased peasants often appear in pairs. And then of course there are the many alleged UFO sightings, which started back in the 1960s when biologist Alexander Swift snapped this photo of a strange light hovering above a completely bare part of the forest. Since then, UFO sightings have become more and more common, but ultimately we have yet to discover why, or if they are really to blame for the strange happenings taking place in Hoia Baciu.
Manchac Swamp in Louisiana is said to be teeming with all sorts of dangers, both living and dead. Now, the very real danger of alligators isn't enough to deter you. The swamp, which is about an hour from Louisiana, is also full of spooky tales, like the legend of a voodoo priestess named Julie White, for example. Julie lived in the swamp and was known for casting curses on those who crossed her. She once predicted that a huge disaster would happen when she died, and sure enough, on the day of her funeral in 1915, a massive hurricane struck the area. Her ghost is said to roam the forest to this day, bringing bad fortune to whoever crosses her path. But if physical danger is more your style, you can also look forward to spotting the Rougarou, a werewolf-like creature that many have reported seeing lurking through the swamp at night.
Elfin Forest in California is a triple threat when it comes to reasons to avoid it at all costs. Why? Well, because it contains an old refurbished insane asylum that was for some reason converted into a resort. It's allegedly been cursed by the Romani people, and it is said to be home to a bunch of angry Native American spirits. While the asylum is now known as Quest Haven Resort, it was once a pretty sketchy place that used shock therapy, lobotomies, starvation, waterboarding, and forcible restraint as forms of treatment for mental illness. A lot of people died there, and according to some, many of them haven't left either. It is also said that the Romani people cursed the lands before being killed by a rival group of Native Americans. When the Native Americans eventually died, their souls were tied to the forest, and they were forced to spend the rest of their days mournfully roaming the area. Legend has it that if you die in Elfin Forest, you will meet the same fate as the natives, as well as the patients of the asylum, and be forced to spend the rest of your days trying to make friends with some pre-21st century ghosts.
Waco, Texas is home to Cameron Park, said to be one of the creepiest forests in the entire state. There's all kinds of paranormal weirdness here, a haunted set of stairs, a witch's castle. It's a real Grimm's fairy tale type of forest, but Texas style. Jacob's Ladder is this huge, steep set of stairs in the middle of the forest. It's quite the climb, and it offers some pretty amazing views, but you may want to avoid climbing Jacob's Ladder at night, if you're the superstitious type. Or just a safety nut. I mean, I wouldn't want to go into the forest and climb a set of stairs without at least having a flashlight on me, but the stairs are also said to be haunted by a malevolent spirit who tugs at people's clothes, sometimes hard enough to have them tumbling down the stairs to their deaths. There's also a set of crumbling ruins known as the Witch's Castle. The story goes that an old hag lived in the forest, practicing dark magic and concocting poisonous potions that she'd feed to her young kidnapped victims. When the locals discovered the old witch was responsible for their young ones going missing, they formed a mob and burnt her home to the ground. Her vengeful spirit is said to stalk the ruins to this day, chasing away intruders, and some say you can still hear the screams of her victims echoing from the forest late at night.
Hidden within Bear Creek Forest in North Carolina is a small dead patch of land known as the Devil's Tramping Grounds. Here, nothing grows, nor can it. According to locals, any vegetation planted there will wither and die within days. Furthermore, animals absolutely refuse to enter the circle, which causes compasses to go wacko. Dogs will tuck their tails between their legs and cry when in close range of the circle, and dig their heels into the dirt if their owners try to pull them in, which is mean, by the way. Leave them alone. As for wildlife, they avoid the area completely, like the plague. While there are some people who have attempted to spend the night inside of the Devil's Tramping Grounds, it is said that no one has lasted for more than a couple hours, because shortly after settling in for the night, a person inside of the Devil's Circle begins to experience headaches, muscle aches, and chest pains. It is said that the devil comes out at night to stomp the grounds and scorch the earth, and I guess he enjoys his private time. While many of us have seen depictions of the devil, locals claim that whoever is unlucky enough to gaze upon the true face of this demon will surely go completely insane.
Daring Woods in Kent, England has a pretty uninviting nickname, the Screaming Woods. They're said to be possibly the most haunted woods in all of Britain. The woods got their nickname because of the ghostly screams that people claim to hear emanating from the forest at night. The sounds are so unsettling that they've scared some visitors out of venturing into the woods at all. One of the most famous legends is about a group of villagers who vanished in the woods back in the 18th century. According to the story, the villagers went into the forest one night and were never seen again. Some say their spirits are still lost to this day, eternally wandering the woods in a state of fear and confusion, calling out into the night in desperation. Another creepy tale involves a highwayman who used to rob travelers passing through the woods. He was eventually caught by locals who pinned him to a tree before lobbing off his head. The legend goes that his ghost still haunts the forest, carrying his own head. People have also reported seeing ghostly figures and strange lights flickering between the trees, and on top of all that, the woods are often full of mist, which not only adds some spooky ambiance, it also makes it a lot easier to get lost.
Epping Forest, located in London, England, has somewhat of a dark history. It is believed that a highwayman and Essex gang member, Dick Turpin, once used the wooded area as a base for criminal activities including the killing of a forest patrolman in the 1730s. It is said that both Turpin and the patrolman now roam the forest. The patrolman mournfully, and Turpin, who was put to death for his crimes, vengefully. Those who enter the forest are immediately hit with an overwhelming sense of dread, which has been known to draw people to a pond located deep within the wooded area. There, many explorers take their final breath before submerging themselves into the murky waters, never to be seen again. And of course, there is a story behind the pull of the pond as well, and it goes like this. According to legend, it all started when a pair of young lovers died there in a involuntary killing 300 years ago. Since then, they have driven others to meet the same fate time and time again. If I were you, I'd avoid this one. The
Pine Barrens in New Jersey are said to be the home of one of the most famous cryptids in the United States, the Jersey Devil. And on top of that, a whole swath of other ghosts. But the legend goes that in 1735, a woman named Deborah Leeds was horrified to learn that she was going to give birth. That's because she'd already done it 12 other times. She was not looking forward to doing it again. She came to hate the thing growing inside her, and while finally in labor, screamed out to the heavens, "Let it be the devil," and out of her, a demonic entity came, a hideous creature with the head of a goat and a set of leathery wings, which it unfurled before flying out the window and into the depths of the swamp, only coming out on the occasional night, swooping down from the sky to feed on livestock. Now, similar to the chupacabra, residents have reported spotting a creature matching this description. Farmers have woken up to their chicken coops being raided, and even police have claimed to see a strange winged creature flying through the night sky. So is this just a myth and a legend, or is there some kind of weird cryptid stalking the forest?
Doe Hill Forest in India contains the ghost of a headless man, a road nicknamed Death Road, and an ominous learning institute that is both haunted and cursed. In fact, it's said to be one of the most haunted institutions in all of India. Let's start with the ghost though. Many people who visit the forest have reported seeing sightings of orbs, hearing disembodied giggles and phantom footsteps, and seeing the body of a headless young man who, when spotted, runs into the trees at top speed and then completely disappears. And then there's Death Road, which is the road that leads from the forest to the learning institution. It's called that because it kind of acts like a road to death, with many of those deaths occurring inside of the institution, and many of the occurrences being unnatural and completely inexplicable. While the institution is still running, I don't know if it should be, it's pretty much abandoned in the summertime. Regardless, the sounds of footsteps can still be heard echoing throughout the building.
Freetown Fall River State Forest in Massachusetts is part of an area known as the Bridgewater Triangle, which is famous for all sorts of supposed paranormal activity. One of the most well-known legends is about the Pukwudgies. So these are small, troll-like creatures from Native American folklore. They're said to be able to appear and disappear at will, cause trouble, and lure people deep into the forest, never to be seen again. There's also the Hokomoke Swamp Monster, a Bigfoot-like creature that's been spotted by a number of witnesses over the years. It's generally described as a large, hairy, ape-like beast. People have also reported hearing strange noises and seeing giant footprints in the forest. The forest also has a dark history with real-life crimes. In the 70s and 80s, a series of brutal killings took place in the area, some of which have never been solved, and some say they're linked to the ghostly apparitions and strange lights coming from the forest. The lights have also been attributed to UFOs. So there's a lot going on in the Bridgewater Triangle. It covers pretty much all your major paranormal food groups, ghosts, cryptids, and UFOs.
10. City of Giants. We often talk about aliens being responsible for building great monuments like the pyramids, but did we ever consider it might be giants? In 2012, something was discovered deep in the Amazon that might suggest just that. A group of researchers, paired with a team of local guides, discovered what appears to be the remains of a large city close to the Ecuador side of the forest. At the center of the city was a large stone pyramid, 80 meters tall, with a flat area on top which held many artifacts. Scattered around the area were many things like old pottery and, most curiously, massive stone tools. They appeared to be much too large and heavy for any average-sized human to ever have been able to use. The government of Ecuador ruled that the formations were just naturally occurring, but the researchers heavily dispute this, saying that due to the rectangle-shaped bricks, cement-like bonding material, and perfectly circular holes, it can't possibly have been caused by nature. Instead, they, and others, believe that this was a city built by giants long ago. What you believe is up to you. Number 9. The Mapinguari Monster. There are many different tribes scattered throughout the Amazon, some without contact to each other, and some without contact to even the outside world. Yet one thing that they all have in common are their stories of a large 7-foot-tall rainforest beast, similar to many cultures' depictions of Bigfoot. The creature is described to be bulletproof and having long hair. It apparently also has a smell that is so strong it makes hunters dizzy. These stories are so widespread and similar that many researchers have gone out in search of the monster, with no luck so far. Some scientists say that this is likely just a legend passed down for centuries, dating back to when giant land sloths roamed the forests, but local people believe it to be a spirit that will kill those who hunt more than their fair share. Number 8. The Boiling River. Hidden deep in the Amazon forest is a hidden river with unexpected and potentially magical properties. Children are told the legends of the Boiling River, about a giant snake spirit that heats it up. Andre Russo went in search of the river after having been raised on the legends by his grandfather, wanting to know if the stories of a boiling river could possibly be true. He took a long journey to reach the supposed location of the river, having to ask permission from a shaman who guarded the waters in order to gain access and study it. Russo discovered that the average temperature of the river was a whopping 187 degrees Fahrenheit, with steam pouring out from the top. It's speculated that the river boils due to faults deep in the earth, but locals believe that it's a magical river with healing properties and use it in their medicinal practices. When Russo was there, he noticed the scariest part of the river, that it kills just about anything that falls into it, dead frogs and other animals floating around where he stood on the edge. Number 7. The Potu bird. Throughout the Amazon rainforest lives a bird known as the common Potu bird. If it's so common, then what makes it so scary? I mean, besides its face. First, let's mention these birds' tendency to always be found in pairs of two, a male and a female. Because of this, legend goes that there were two children, a boy and a girl, living with their father and stepmother. The stepmother was evil and greedy, wanting to gain all of her husband's inheritance, so she convinced the man to abandon his children within the forest to die. He succeeds, leaving them lost in the forest with no hope for them to find their way out. However, the mother spirit of the forest took pity on them and adopted the two as her own children, making them into birds. Stories go that the call of the Potu bird sounds like children calling out in anguish, desperate to escape the forest and return to their family. If you think this legend sounds a lot like Hansel and Gretel, you'd be right. This one just contains a lot less candy and witches. Number 6. Dangerous animals. Well, we've somehow made it this far without mentioning the many scary and terrifying creatures hiding within the depths of the forest. Life in the forest has evolved these creatures to have many unique and frightening abilities in order to survive. Let's start with perhaps one of their most famous, piranhas. Piranhas live in the Amazon River basin and are known for their incredibly strong and razor-sharp bites, even being known to have eaten human flesh. Next, poison dart frogs. While beautiful to look at, as their name suggests, they secrete a poison that can cause heart failure in just a few minutes. Arachnophobes look away, as I'm going to tell you about the Brazilian wandering spider. It is one of the most venomous spiders on the planet, and 8 different species of them wander the forest at night in search of food. So you may want to double check your sleeping bag before you get in, as their venom can lead to trouble breathing and paralysis. Finally, a very famous name in the rainforest, the green anaconda, or man-eater. These snakes can grow incredibly large and kill their prey by suffocating them within a tight coiled hold. Number 5. Amazon rings. The Amazon rings are famous massive circular ditches, sometimes up to 16 feet deep and just as wide. So how could these geoglyphs have appeared within the forest? The reality seems to be that these were created before the forest itself even existed. It's hard to imagine a time before the Amazon forest grew, but studies suggest that these rings were created long before the forest was. It's thought to be more remnants of life in the Amazon before the Europeans arrived, with an estimated 6 to 10 million people living in the area. It's unsure just what exactly these rings were used for, and some people have gone as far as to suggest that aliens left the markings in the ground behind, a sort of Amazon crop circle. It's unfortunate that the discovery of these rings was a direct result of the clear cutting and logging going on in the forest. Number 4. Lost cities. Even as recently as the 20th century, explorers have been venturing into the rainforest for supposed lost cities that have never been found. Some of those explorers even becoming lost, never to be seen again, like the tale of British explorer Percy Fawcett. As it turns out, scientists have discovered that these lost cities that so many went in search of likely did really exist, thanks to some high-tech helicopter remote sensing technology. It seems that there were massive cities that were abandoned only some 600 years ago, and it's believed that up to 2 million people lived in the rainforest at one point. The cities stretch for miles and include things like complex waterway systems and large conical pyramids. The true mystery is what happened to this civilization. How do entire cities disappear into the forest without a trace? As these cities were built with mud bricks and are almost completely destroyed, we may never know what really happened to them. Number 3. The Man of the Hole. One famous resident of the vast rainforest is someone you've probably never heard of before. He is known as the Man of the Hole, as no one knows his true name or who he really is. So why is he so famous? He's indigenous to the rainforest and is known to be the very last remaining member of his remote tribe. The rest of his people were killed by farmers and land grabbers who wanted to make use of the land that they'd been living on. As a result, he is the loneliest man in the world, no one knowing his language or how to communicate with him. And it seems as though he doesn't want anyone to anyways. He has attacked government officials who have tried to come close, living on his now protected territory, digging holes to hide in and capture animals, earning his name of the Man in the Hole. It's also thought that he may be making these holes to try and capture anyone who would dare get close to him. He has been caught on camera only a few times, showing us that he's still around. Number 2. El Tunche. If you ever, for some reason, find yourself walking through the rainforest and you hear a distant whistling sound, it would be wise of you not to seek it out, especially if you've been stomping on a few too many plants lately. That's because what you are hearing might be the call of El Tunche, a demon who wanders the forest, protecting the wildlife and condemning those who would harm it. If you haven't done any damage to the forest, then he'll probably just scare you off. But if you have, you might as well start running. By calling out, the demon is trying to entice you to whistle back and reveal your exact location to him. If you do so, El Tunche's call will grow louder and louder, following you wherever you go. Eventually, it invades your mind as you sleep, drawing you into madness. I think that's a good enough reason to start being a little bit kinder to our natural surroundings. Number 1. El Lobizon. A widespread legend across South America is that of El Lobizon. It is a werewolf-like creature that can be seen walking on all fours and also on its hind legs. Different from Western and Hollywood interpretations and depictions of werewolves, El Lobizon is not created through a bite, but instead born. Any 7th son that is born in an unbroken line of boys will become the creature, usually transforming around their 13th birthday. The stories have caused people to abandon, give up, or even kill their own 7th son. Every full moon, the boy will transform into the wolf-like creature, hunting down prey with unmatched speed and endurance. While just a legend, with a place as vast as the rainforest, who knows if El Lobizon isn't hiding in those darkest hidden corners.
Starting off this countdown, we have the deer head. Posted on Reddit by RipeOTCDXVI, they claim to be a forest ranger at Yellowstone National Park. One day they were out exploring a part of the park called Lamar Valley, which is about 11 miles from the nearest road. While on the trail, they stumbled upon something very shocking: a perfectly severed deer head. There was no blood whatsoever, and it was cut off with precision. Now obviously, since this is a park, rangers come across dead animals all the time, but never in such perfect condition. Also, the head was completely uneaten. So now the question is, who did this? Why did they do this? How did they do this? Moving on to number 9, we have the abandoned tent. Reddit user Not So Single Buck was at work one day when he came across a campsite that was set outside of the designated campsite area, which is against the rules of the park, so he went to investigate. In the tent, he found a sleeping bag, some dirty clothes, lots of canned food, and a teddy bear. The whole tent smelled of cigarette smoke. There was nothing that he could do though until the individual returned. He didn't want to wait all day, so he just took the open food to prevent animals from being attracted to it and left a note explaining where he had taken the food and why. 2 weeks later, he returned to the tent and it had remained untouched. As a result, him and his team cleared out the tent. Whatever happened to the person staying in the tent remains a huge mystery. Did a wild animal get to them? Did they fall off a cliff? A body was never found, so we may never know. Coming in at number 8, we have the wolf pack. This story happened 3 years ago by an old-timey forest ranger that worked in Montana. He was out roaming around on his ATV when he saw an older lady in the distance. She was screaming as 6 wolves closed in around her. The ranger drove down to her as fast as he could, yelling and honking, trying to scare away the wolves. But when he got there, she was nowhere to be found. The only sign of her was a single ring with a black stone which was on the ground where the woman was standing. Seems like the wolves got to her and carried her away. Coming in at number 7, we have the strange blue lights. This person used to work as a ranger at Philmont Scout Ranch in New Mexico. There's a place on this ranch that is said to be haunted. There's a number of urban legends surrounding this place, like, oh, it's the portal to the underworld, or it's home to an ancient cursed burial ground, you get it. There's also this very eerie legend saying that on some nights, blue lights can be seen. One story claims that a hiker saw an eerie figure on the trail. The figure was tall and emitting a blue light. Well, legend goes that the blue lights are coming from a shaman that guards the ground. Anyways, obviously these are just legends, right? Well, one night the ranger was out with a scout troop when they saw a bunch of weird lights coming from a trail. These were the infamous blue lights talked about in multiple legends. Everyone was so freaked out that they got out of there as fast as they could. Now, let's just say that they're all believers. In our sixth spot, we have these skinned animals. So a couple of years ago, 2 forest rangers were on their way to a far location when it got dark out. As a result, they had to camp overnight. But during the night, they were woken up by the sound of footsteps right outside of their tent. All of a sudden, they heard a number of people yell, "Get out!" The 2 rangers packed up as fast as they could and got the hell out of there. The next morning, the cops went to check out the area and found 4 skinned animals nailed to the trees surrounding their campsite. Okay, that is horrifying, and I have a number of questions. Number 1, who the heck were these people? Number 2, what were they doing there? Number 3, what the heck? And number 4, what the heck? Seriously, that is so messed up. Were they doing some satanic ritual and the forest rangers ruined it, or what? We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Wendigo. Imagine going out camping with some friends and encountering a Wendigo during your trip. Wouldn't that be insane and terrifying? Like if you agree. Well, this happened to a forest ranger and a bunch of his friends. So the group went out camping and all was going well. Until the second night. During the night, all 4 of the men woke up to a loud, high-pitched scream. They assumed it was just the coyote. But the next morning, they were in for a surprise. By their campsite, they found a bunch of animal guts everywhere. The ranger described it as if there was a bomb in an animal and then it went off. There was just fur, blood, and flesh everywhere. That night is when they came across the monster that devoured the animal. They were out investigating a sound when they saw a weird tall figure move in the distance. It was about 6 feet tall and did not look like an animal and did not look like a human. When the creature spotted the men, it took off in a flash. They believe that they encountered a Wendigo. Coming in at number 4, we have the man in the woods. This next individual was a park ranger on a small island. The island could only be accessed by a private boat. During the summer, there would be hordes of people there, but during the off-season, the ranger would be the only one on the island. One night, the ranger decided to take a hike around the entire island. Yeah, at night, when it's dark. He thought it would be a fun challenge for himself. Plus, there was no cell or internet service, so you know, what else could you really do? While he was out on his hike, he heard a noise coming from behind him. He turned around and standing behind him was a crazy old man. He was a super pale and super tall man with dark hair. The man gave out a creepy smile and then cackled. The ranger ran for his life and this crazy man ran after him until the ranger made it back safely to his cabin. In the morning, he went back on the trail he had been on, and there were no sets of other footprints, only his own, as if the man had never been there at all. Moving on at number 3, we have the polar bears. So this next individual was a park ranger in the northern part of Ontario, Canada. In the middle of the night, she woke up to hear something outside of her tent. She opened her eyes and saw the head of a polar bear peeking into her tent. Imagine waking up and seeing that thing breathing in your face. Like, what would you do? Well, the correct answer is don't panic and don't frighten the bear. Thankfully, that's what the ranger did. She stayed calm and eventually the bear left the tent. That could have ended much worse for this woman. She got lucky. Like, I think I would have peed myself, seriously. In our second spot, we have the river accident. A man named Kevin Uxbridge used to be a ranger at Yosemite. One day, he was making his way through the gate, which was along a river, when he heard a huge commotion. People were yelling and screaming and crying. Well, turns out there was a husband and wife standing by the river. The husband was taking a picture of his wife and kept telling her to back up, you know, so he could get a good shot. Well, she ended up backing up too far and she fell into the river. The river was pretty violent that day, so within seconds she was swept under. It took the ranger and firefighters 2 months before they could find her body. The worst part? Her body was found in the swimming hole when the river had settled. People were swimming in there just days before they found her. And in our number 1 spot, we have the ghostly body. This next story comes from a trail ranger. One time, he noticed that there was a bunch of illegally placed wildlife cameras around, so he went around taking them down. Things were going well until he started hearing a bunch of weird voices. He hopped back on his ATV, but the battery was disconnected, so he couldn't drive off. He was then stuck there waiting for someone to pick him up. They were an hour away and it was getting dark. He decided to sit down and make a small fire. Before he knew it, the voices were back, this time getting louder and louder. Finally, he could hear what was being said. It was 2 hunters arguing over a kill. That's when all of a sudden he heard a loud bang. It was a gunshot. After that, he smothered the fire and hid until his coworkers arrived. The next day, the two came back with the police to investigate the area. After about an hour of looking, they came across a shallow grave. In it, they found a dead man who had been shot in the face. The freakiest part? It was just the skeleton of the man. He had been there for years. So it seems like he heard ghosts reenacting the murder that happened years ago or something like that. I don't know, it is so freaky.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have The Smiler. This story comes from Reddit user Blasphemous Mushrooms, and it's about his friend Tom. Tom was a new police officer who had been given late night shifts. He never came across anything too strange on his patrol, but this night was different. He was by a local park, checking there was nobody doing anything suspicious there late at night. As he walked around the outskirts of the woods, he saw a man standing with his back facing him on the edge of the darkness. Tom yelled out to the man, "Hey, you, what are you doing? Come over here right now." The man turned round and gave him a blood-curdling smile. Then he ran into the woods. Without even thinking, Tom chased after him. The smiling man was leaping over branches and ducking under fallen trees like a pro. It was almost inhuman. He was on another level. Eventually, he stopped in a clearing in the forest. He smiled and then kept running. Finally, they reached a clearing in the woods. Tom was exhausted and only just managed to even look up. The man had stopped. He turned around, smiled, and then began to walk slowly back into the woods again. Tom chased, but the man was gone. It was like he had just vanished into thin air. To this day, he swears this wasn't a normal criminal. He had an experience with a sinister paranormal being. Next up at number 9 now, we have The Kidnapping. This one comes from Dr. Jim Danger, who said that when he was 18, he and his friends took a trip to the Apalachicola forest in Florida. They drove deep into the woods so they wouldn't be disturbed by any park rangers. On the very first night, they decided to do some exploring. Almost immediately on their walk, they started seeing signs that someone had been there before them. Big bags of trash were strewn everywhere. They came across a campsite with a van. There were clothes strung up on a line, coolers around the area, and a big golden retriever. They tried to back out, but then an old man stepped out and greeted them. He was friendly and chatted to them for 10 minutes about where they were from before they went on their way. Something didn't seem quite right with him. 2 months after the trip, a friend called him and told him to turn on the news. It showed an old guy with a van and a golden retriever. His name was Gary Michael Hilton, and he had just been convicted of at least 4 murders. He had kidnapped and murdered a girl in Georgia, an older couple in North Carolina, and a girl in the very same park they had been in not long after they left. They called the police and ended up actually helping them with the investigation that sent the murderer to prison. At number 8 now, we have The Mountain Man. This one comes from Reddit user CMurder4000. He's a geologist who said that he did his graduate fieldwork in Nevada. He was way out in the middle of nowhere when he saw a hand-built shack in the distance. A mountain man stepped out and looked at him. He panicked and went away. A while later, he was in a nearby area when he walked up to what looked like some kind of farm. When he got closer, he could smell the strong scent of marijuana. It was an outdoor weed farm. As he turned to get out of there, he was confronted by a man with a gun. The man offered him $10,000 to not report what he had seen and let him go. He agreed, but he never collected the $10,000 or even reported it, saying he was too scared to do either. Next up at number 7 now, we have The Screaming Woods. This forest lies just outside of Pluckley, said to be the most haunted village in Britain. The woods get their name because of the blood-curdling screams locals hear from the forest forest late at night. They say it's haunted by a highwayman who was captured by the villagers hundreds of years ago. They dragged the criminal into the woods, pinned him to a tree, and killed him with a sword. He screamed as he fell to his death. Visitors come from all over to experience the paranormal goings on there. I found a story from a recent visitor that went like this. I was in Pluckley and a group of friends and I decided to go to Deering Woods. When we got there was birds singing and the atmosphere seemed quite happy. We got out the car and my friend noticed that the birds had stopped singing as we went into the woods. You could have heard a pin drop as we walked in up to halfway towards the crossroads, and us girls decided to come out, so we went into the car and the boys went back in. About 20 minutes later, the boys came running out. They got in the car, started it, and turned it head on to the woods where my friend's brand new car had stalled. We saw this black mist coming towards us as if it was walking down the path. There was definitely something there. We then went down to the Black Horse pub where we discussed the day's ghost hunt, and the boys said it was only when they started getting close to the crossroads that it appeared, so they ran out. We have talked to a few of the local people who have said that early in the morning you can hear screaming coming from the woods. Next up at number 6 now, we have The Thing. This one comes from Surly Vet. He said his friend was deer hunting once in the mountains of Virginia back in the 1990s. One winter morning he set out with his gun to a tree stand. It was still very dark when he arrived, and so he climbed up and waited until dawn. While he was waiting, he decided to reverse the batteries in his flashlight. He had an issue with the switch and thought this might fix it. Suddenly though, he was disturbed by a chill running down his spine. Out of nowhere, he began to feel a crippling fear and a feeling of being watched. He was thinking about climbing down from the tree stand and walking back to his truck when he heard a blood-curdling scream at the base of his tree, along with scratches and rustling in the bushes. He fumbled for his flashlight and cursed himself for messing around with the batteries then. He said the thing that was down there was able to elicit a fear in him like nothing he'd ever experienced. Before that, he'd always felt very calm with a gun and confident that he could handle any animal out there. This time though, he was filled with horror and dread. The thing screamed, shrieked and scratched for 15 minutes and then total silence. Not once did he see anything. When he came down a few hours later, he packed up and left the area. He has never been hunting again. Moving on to number 5 now, we have The Rope. This one was first told by Rodat on Reddit. He wrote a brilliant first-hand account which I'll read for you now. Me and my friends thought it would be a great idea to share a few drinks on the side of a dark and unfrequented mountain road at 2 in the morning when everyone should be asleep and no one would bother our drunken boisterousness. Where I grew up, it's very common to go around on motorcycles, not the speedy racing types, but the more commercial 150cc variety. It's also very common to ride these motorcycles without helmets, and the weather usually calls for just a light windbreaker, even on very dark nights on lonely roads such as the one we were on. After distancing ourselves sufficiently from civilization as it was, we parked by the side of the road under a tree. I should mention there was a dim glow emanated by the moon, and our eyes quickly adjusted to the darkness enough to see each other. Another thing worth mentioning is that this road led to an army encampment several kilometers away. So the only sort of people that would potentially drive by us were tough army folk. It was now 10 minutes past, and we were having a good time when we see headlights creeping up towards us. We ignore them because we were all well sheltered from the pavement, sitting under a large tree whose branches grew wide and provided a good deal of cover. The headlights belonged to a Jeep that zoomed past us and suddenly came to a halt. They see us. This was terrifying because here we are, drunk as college students usually are, on bikes without helmets at 3 a.m. on a winding mountain road. But our fear was slightly alleviated as the car drove away. Still, why stop at all? They joked and said that the guy probably saw there was 4 of us and 1 of them. Ha ha ha, loser. Some more time passes. A second pair of headlights belonging to another car drives past us, stops, and then leaves. At this point we were getting more and more sober and more worried, so we decide to call it a night and head home. We get on our bikes and start riding back when one of us realizes he's left his backpack under the tree. So we turn around to cover those 3 to 4 kilometers to where we were. As we approach the tree, the backpack owner dismounts while we turn the bikes around. One of our headlights sweeps an intensely bright beam across the branches of the tree. As it points to the branches just above where we were sitting, in a flash we witness, illuminated in stark contrast to the background darkness, a human body hanging by a rope. It had been there the whole time. Now we know why the cars were stopping, and we drove on. Next up at number 4 now, we have Sally in the Wood. Just outside of Bath in the UK, you will find some woods that many locals dare not go near. It's a patch of woodland known simply as Sally in the Wood. Supposedly, it's haunted by the ghost of a murdered girl. They say that birds in the woods there cannot sing. Drivers have reported hearing a child scream from the darkness, and some swear they see the ghost of a young girl running out into the road. Legend says that Sally, the murdered girl, haunts the woods at night. She causes cars to crash on the unlit stretch of road where she comes out from behind the trees. They say she was a gypsy girl, supposedly imprisoned in the 18th century. She was locked up in a tower without food and water, left to die inside the woods. Others say she was a local witch who lived to be 100 years old and now continues to torment others in death. Locals say that she may be dead, but her chilling stories live on. Coming in at number 3 now, we have the cougar. This one comes from Reddit user Smokey the Marshmallow. He said the scariest experience he had as a park ranger in Washington State was being stalked by a cougar for a day and a half. One day she was hiking up an old trail when she had the creepy feeling of being watched. That night she camped at a shelter made of 3 walls and a roof. One side was completely open. At one point, she even put her emergency foil tarp around her sleeping bag so that she could hear anything stepping around her. The next day, she found fresh cougar feces and scratches on trees on the trail that she had just hiked on. About a mile past the shelter, she found a half-eaten deer in a brush off the trail. That's when she knew that a cougar was nearby and that it was stalking her. The last 2 hours of hiking through the dense forest were the most hair-raising of any hike she had been on. Next up at number 2 now, we have The Visitor. Some of you guys may have heard me talk about this story in another video, but it's too good to leave off the list. It comes from Senior Puffy Pants. I still remember that name. He said he was once leading a group of school kids up Mount Sterling in North Carolina. They were camping at the top of the mountain on a beautiful night with a full moon. The kids and the other guide went to bed in their tents. He chose to sleep in a hammock outside. He lay there reading his book until 10:30 p.m. when he decided to go to sleep. The moon was so bright that it lit up the trail they had just climbed up on. As he was drifting off to sleep, he saw something move on the trail. As he looked closer, he noticed it was a person. They were in the middle of nowhere, and there was someone hiking up the trail towards them with no headlamp on or any gear. He froze as the person moved closer towards the camp. They arrived at the top of the mountain and then stopped in their tracks. It was a man. He sat there in a way that looked like he wasn't trying to sleep. He was just watching them. The guide was terrified. He stared back at the man. They stared at each other. This went on for hours and hours. Then, at 3:30 in the morning, the man stood up. He took a moment to survey the camp, a few minutes longer, and then went back down the trail they had all come up on. To this day, he has no idea who the man was, what he wanted, and why exactly he was staring at them. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Goblin. This one comes from Reddit user Justin F100,000. He said this one happened about 8 years ago. He was working as a camp counselor for Camp Tommy in New York State. He was staying in some cabins at the top of the mountain, each one separated by about half a mile. One night, at about 1 a.m., he was sneaking off to meet his girlfriend in another cabin. He decided to cut through the forest to speed up the journey. Suddenly, he heard a rustling in the woods, and he stopped to investigate it. There are big animals that live in those woods, so he was expecting to see something like that. A bear, perhaps. All of a sudden, though, this 3-foot-tall humanoid thing jumped out of the bushes and just looked at him. It was too dark to make out any real features, but it definitely had 2 feet, 2 arms, and basically looked just like a person, but tiny. He was curious and walked towards it. He spooked the thing and it bolted back out into the woods. It ran stiffly but was very, very quick. To this day, he has no idea what the creature was, although everyone seems to have their own theories.
Starting off this list, and at number 10, we have Ilsa de las Muñeces in Mexico. And I'm probably saying it wrong. I don't speak Spanish, I'm sorry. But you've all seen these pictures before. And if you haven't, well, get ready to brace yourselves because this is some pretty creepy stuff. Okay, see, what did I tell you? This is what nightmares are made of, and you guys have seen it before, these pictures. Well, let me tell you how this creepy doll forest started. On this island, a caretaker found a body of a girl in one of the canals. He found a doll floating in the water and he decided to hang it from one of the trees as some sort of like tribute. He continued to hang thousands of dolls until he drowned in the exact same spot where that girl died. Some people believe that the dolls are evil, while others believe that the dolls keep the island safe. So today a lot of tourists tourists come to visit this island. I personally don't see the appeal. I definitely don't have this creepy doll island on my bucket list, but for those people who visit the island, they say that they can see the dolls move their eyes, heads, and limbs. I mean, no thanks. I guess the dolls must be possessed by evil spirits or something, but I'm not about to go there and find out. I'm not about that life. Up next, number 9, we have the Pine Barrens. The forest spans over 1 million acres and it is located in New Jersey. According to the local legend, the Jersey Devil is known to roam around this forest. He was born in 1735, except he didn't look like a child. He was born with leather wings, a ghost head, and hooves. He flew up a chimney and into the forest, and he has been killing livestock and creeping out the residents ever since. Locals living near the forest can hear high-pitched screams, and they're too scared to venture into these woods because they don't want to come face to face with this demon. Coming into number 8, we have the Wychwood Forest in England. Hands reaching out and touching you, and a horse-drawn cart carrying a couple of their crying children. Well, these are just a few things that you'll see if you decide for some reason to go inside of these woods. But one of the scariest legends that originated in this forest is about Amy Robsart. She mysteriously died of a broken neck, but she confronted her husband as a ghost and told him that he will join her in 10 days. And sure enough, he died after becoming ill with an unknown reason, but it also said that anyone who walks into this forest and sees Amy Robsart will die shortly after. So yeah, my recommendation would be to stay far, far away from these woods. The Freeton Fall River State Forest is next up at number 7. Now this is pretty unlucky number 7. This forest is known as a paranormal breeding ground. It is believed to be the shire of a bunch of satanic murders that occurred in the 70s and the 80s. There have been creepy UFO sightings here, poltergeist activity, and fireballs are emerging just out of nowhere. The forest is also said to be the home to a race of humanoid creatures known as pickwedges. These creatures look like troll beats that are known to cause trouble. They will intentionally startle people, throw rock or sand in their faces, push or shove them, kidnap them, hurl them off a cliff, wrestle them, or even attack them with knives or spears. These creatures have been blamed for a lot of deaths that have occurred here, and people still report seeing them in this forest. The Devil's Tramping Ground curses us in at number 6. Located in North Carolina, these woods are known as one of the most haunted places in this state. The Devil's Tramping Ground is located deep within a forest, but it is a perfectly round 40-foot circle, and the circle doesn't have one single flower, weed, or blade of grass. That's because anything that gets planted here will either wither and die. If that doesn't seem strange to you, if you put an object in the circle before sunset, it will violently be thrown out of the circle before sunrise. When dogs get too close to the circle, they will whimper and bark, and they would refuse to go in. People have tried to spend the night in the circle, but no one has been able to do it, or they have gone insane. It is believed that this is where the devil comes out at night to do his pacing and thinking. Because of this area has a really bad reputation. Well, yeah, no duh. People have seen red eyes glowing there at night, and they can feel like something bad is about to happen. Well, here's a clip of two guys who thought it would be, a great idea to visit the Devil's Tramping Ground. What they found will shock you.
Or had to get out here in a hurry.
The Burial Ground Forest takes us into number 5. Let's travel over to England and into the Epping Forest. This forest is so large that it's become a very popular hideout for criminals on the run, and it's also a very notorious forest for dead bodies. This 6,000-acre forest has been the hideout for a lot of dangerous criminals and murders. So yeah, this definitely isn't a nice place for kids to play in, and on top of that, there are hundreds of dead bodies buried in these woods from gruesome murders. Oh, and a lot of children were targeted here by Ronald Jepson, who was a very sick pedophile and murderer. It is also said that cars parked on Hangman's Hill are said to roll uphill when they're parked in neutral. I don't know why you would ever park your car on Hangman's Hill. I mean, the name alone says it all. The Screaming Woods come onto this list at number 4. Well, this sounds like the absolute worst place to host a camping trip. I mean, am I right? The actual name of this place is Durwing Woods, and it is located located in Somerton, England. Hikers have said they can hear blood-curdling screams coming from the forest at night, and they can also hear footsteps and whispers on foggy days. Apparently a man was captured and killed in these woods by local villagers in the 18th century, and it is believed that his ghost still holds a grudge and will do anything in his power to harm the living, while others believe that the hauntings are caused by 20 ghosts who were found dead in the forest from a massacre that occurred in 1948. Autopsies were done on the bodies, but they couldn't determine a cause of death. The Dow Hill Forest comes crashing on this list like just like that at number 3. And yeah, I'm doing my own sound effects for this one because why not? Well, this forest has its own fair share of gory murders, and lots of people have seen a headless boy wandering around in the trees along the path. This creepy path is known as Death Road, and if you ever find yourself walking around this path, you will feel like you're being constantly watched by something evil. Some people have even seen the red eyes staring at them. There's even a ghost of a woman dressed in gray, and you aren't supposed to look or talk to her. And there is something in the air that will make you feel like you're losing your mind. And for some, the air makes them kill themselves. And now at number 2, we have the Suicide Forest in Japan. Obviously, no haunted forest list could be complete without this infamous forest. The Suicide Forest can be found at the base of Mount Fuji, and it's arguably one of the most scary places in the entire world. There are rumors that the iron in these woods interfere with compasses, which causes hikers to go in the wrong direction, and they will go deeper and deeper into the woods. These hikers will become so lost that they can't find their way out. But what makes things even worse is that the forest has been the site of more than 500 reported suicides since the 1950s. People claim that they can hear their spirits scream throughout the night, and you can hear necks breaking. And yes, this is the infamous forest that, you know, Logan Paul did his shenanigans in. You guys know the whole thing, I'm not gonna get into it. Coming in at number 1, we have the most haunted forest in the world, the Hoia Baciu woods located in Romania. It's almost like this guy named the forest after he sneezed. Baciu, Baciu. Well, if you value your life, you will never ever step foot in these forests, and I'll tell you why. It covers 250 hectares of land, and it is referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of the country. It has a reputation for intense paranormal activity and unexplained things that have happened here. Brave people who have entered these woods have seen ghosts, faces appearing in photos, unexplained figures, and UFO sightings. If you go into this forest, you will feel intense anxiety and feel like you're being watched. People who live near the forest are afraid to go in because they believe the people who visit will never return home. Some of the locals who were crazy enough to go inside complained of having rashes, nausea, vomiting, migraines, burns, scratches, anxieties, and other weird feelings. But get this, some people even believe that the forest is a gateway to another dimension. People have been known to disappear in these woods, and strange lights can also be seen. A 5-year-old girl wandered into the woods and got lost, but apparently she came out of the woods 5 years later, wearing the same clothes, but she actually had no memory of what happened within those 5 years. I mean, I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about it. When I read that, I couldn't believe it.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about real alien sightings that the government doesn't want you to see. Click the video now to find out more. What are you waiting for?